Hi guys, welcome back to Pure Core. I'm your host Elliot, host, speaker. I don't know what the right term for this thing is. But it's episode 3. Uh, we're very just scratching the surface really. But today I thought it was very important to have a bit of a conversation. I'm not really sure what to call these. I guess they're kind of like video essays. Someone asked me the other day, what are these videos? I guess they're video essays. We'll call them that for now because it's only me talking. You guys are listening. Hopefully, you're taking this all in and it's beneficial. But yeah, I mean, let's get into it. Today's topic, which I felt was very important to get into, one which I think there's a bit of an epidemic around actually in a lot of more modern Western society, which is where I live in London, of course, is anxiety. Um, there's very few people I think aren't afflicted by anxiety in some way or another. I think it has deep roots in most people's lives. I think we're often gripped by that sensation. I think first of all, I mean, let's get into what is anxiety. I think that's a good place to start, as I have done with I think the first two episodes. Is determining what we're doing here is always a good place to start. So, what is anxiety? And I've I guess outlined it as a physical and mental sensation that arises when our desire for a particular outcome is met with the uncertainty that we may not receive or attain said outcome. And that's quite broad, right? That can kind of go into anything. There isn't uh anything too specific within that sentence there that kind of details I guess what it is for most people on a personal term. And I also connect that to a bit of a lack of control. I think whenever we feel there's a bit of a lack of control in what we're doing or what's happening or something that's happening around us, whether that's kind of, I guess, to typecast it, because again I think we did that well in the video about sacrifice. So to put it into two main spectrums or two main types for people who, again, not just Western society, but I don't know why I referenced that so much, but again, for people who live in, let's just say Western society for now. I think other parts of the world there's a lot more serious things happening, and they don't really have time for anxiety on the same scale that a lot of us do in Europe, the US, some places in the Middle East, whatever. Anyway, we're getting off topic. Yeah, one of the I guess the two main types, or one of the main types, let's say, because this goes into sacrifice. We did a lot of talk about the workplace, work life. A lot of it is present in the workplace. A lot of it is present in social settings. But I would say that workplace anxiety is very similar to social anxiety. The type of anxiety you might get before a meeting where you have to give a presentation, or the type of anxiety you might get before you're going on a dinner date and you really want to impress the person that you're meeting, but you have your own personal hang-ups, which is your ego. And this is what we're going to get into today. Anxiety is largely driven by your ego, which is, again, we've got loads of videos planned. The ego we will get into in a lot more detail, but the ego is one thing that's going to be a big part of this video about anxiety. It is only really your ego that feels the anxiety. And again, that's to do with the lack of control. Your ego wants unparalleled control over the outcomes. Your ego wants to be able to say, this is what's going to happen. It's going to happen like this. This person will think this in response to what I do, and they're going to feel this way based on how I act or behave towards them. And it's going to go exactly how as I see it or want it planned out in my head. And we know that, that's just not possible. That's not a realistic thing to think you can have or should have, essentially. You have to be you. We're all individuals, and we should never, our ego should never have us in a state where, our heart is racing, we're sweating, we're feeling anxious because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how someone's going to react to, or a group of people are going to react to something that we're about to do, or a task that we have to undertake. So again, just to neatly outline that our ego wants unparalleled control over outcomes, specifically where other people's opinions are concerned. I think that's, again, for us, a lot of times in the workplace, in social settings, relationship settings, the anxiety is attached to our facade, our ego, our pride, our external representation of us, the way people perceive us. We want to maintain that on a flat landscape across every single setting. It's not realistic, and you have to be able to, I guess, accept that you cannot have that type of control over people But the ego is very powerful. It drives a lot of what we do in everyday life. Our decisions are largely driven by our ego, by how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about other people. And that is why we feel that anxiety. And that anxiety is usually attached to people who we want the respect of as well. Because if you don't want someone's respect in whatever setting we're talking about, then you aren't really going to feel anxiety about whether or not they perceive you to be one way or another. It's kind of, you're going to feel indifferent towards that person. And largely, you're going to kind of let go of the outcomes and what might happen because it's like, oh, I don't really care about this person's opinion. Um, it doesn't matter to me whether and a good way to figure out where your soft spots are when it comes to your ego is when you feel your anxiety brewing up. Who triggers your anxiety? Is it the pretty girl that you're going after, or the hot guy that you're going after, depending on what your orientation is? So these things are, I guess, are all attached to the ego, as I said, and it kind of, yeah, is connected to our fear of making mistakes because no one wants to make a mistake. We make a mistake, we feel like an idiot, we feel stupid, we feel like no one's going to think of us the same ever again. We think that we've completely diminished ourselves in the eyes of others, when in reality, that's not the case. Everyone makes mistakes. There's no one who doesn't make mistakes. And it's part of being a human being, right? You make mistakes, you learn from them, you grow. I think the problem is if you make the mistake and you don't learn from it, you don't grow. That's where you're going to have a problem. There is no one, even if, let's say you make a comical error, maybe it's a name you get wrong, or I don't know. People have a habit of jumping on mistakes that other people make and kind of making jokes about them. Again, you have to desensitize yourself to stuff like that. You have to be able to also poke fun at yourself sometimes. If you make an error or make a mistake, it's one way to really get around that anxiety is to just be vulnerable in a lot of things. But again, that is very difficult to do. And it's, I guess, quite a crippling feeling when that anxiety takes over you. You want to run away from the situation because, as I said, it's both physical and mental, and that's how you know it's a very strong sensation. Because when you have a physiological reaction to something which isn't necessarily impacting your body, just your mind, that's when you know you're really being struck by whatever this thing is. But again, it's largely your ego which is feeling that. You, the self, you kind of just want to get the thing over with, I think, more than anything. But it is the ego specifically that wants that control, that wants to be able to say, no, we're going to do it, but we want to do it this way, and this needs to be the outcome that we get out of it. Again, we cannot be too attached to the specific outcomes. I want to do this in order. I don't want to jump ahead. So we've outlined what it is. We've outlined some core types, as I said. Similarly, I'm using my examples, but I think you can always apply your examples. So my examples of where again, I don't feel anxiety in a very traditional sense anymore. It's only, I mean, I can't tell you the last time I felt anxiety, and I'm going to explain to you why that is later down the line. But these were the types of settings where I would feel the anxiety. As I said, workplace situations where I care about the outcome, social settings where I want to come through for people, perhaps whether that's a friend, a family member, or something like that. And then relationship settings where you're trying to build connection with people in a relationship, a significant other, a woman in my case. Um, you're on your way to the dinner date, and I'd often find, and I guess it's always good to share a bit of social setting. One of my issues I would have on dinner dates, a lot of times, dinner dates or any kind of whatever the plan was for the day. You've met an attractive girl somewhere, wherever it is, whether it's on the apps or in person or at work or whatever, and you set up or arrange to go and meet somewhere else. I would find that the anxiety would have me sweating. And then the tube, if you live in London, the tube is a hot enough place as it is. But that heat of anticipation and wanting to deliver for myself would create said anxiety, and I think it would almost put me in an even worse situation because I would start sweating, and I might be flustered and flushed in the face, so I'm looking a bit more red, and my eyes are probably a bit glazed, and I'm a lot less reactive. Maybe I'm a bit shaky, a bit jittery. That lack of relaxation in you as you're approaching this thing, which is of prominent importance to you, it minimizes your ability to handle it, which is why it's very important to get a hold of your anxiety from a very early outset standpoint. I think if you can do that, you're much better at handling the things that you really care about, which is why it's important, why I felt it was very important today to kind of approach this topic so I could share some of my, I guess, tips or keys to handling anxiety, or just understanding what it is and knowing how you can best manage it, because it's not always the case where you're going to be able to remove it completely. I feel like I made a great strides towards doing that. Um, and even when it comes to making these videos, I don't feel the anxiety of having to speak to you guys because I know that this is a purpose. As I said in previous video, these are things that you kind of have to get around through your own mind and then actualizing them. So again, we've talked about what it is. We've discussed types of anxiety and how that manifests for us as individuals. Like I said, everyone has their own things that they care about, and it's usually the things that you care about that create your anxiety kind of soft spots or touch points. So the feeling is generally connected to our lack of perceived ability to steer a situation towards the outcome we most desire. Um, so to go further into that, again, I'll use my example. So when I'm in a meeting, let's say, and I've got the monthly report to deliver, and let's say it's a bad monthly report. The details in the report are not exactly up to the standard that I wanted for the month. Okay, so let's say it's May. We were supposed to hit X, Y, Z targets, KPIs, and whatever else. I'm sure a lot of you will have those at your day jobs. And we didn't quite meet those. So, potentially there's going to be some pushback on some of the things that you're discussing in your meeting that day. Um, that is going to create that feeling of anxiety. You're going to be anxious over how people respond to the less than positive results. You're going to wonder what type of questions they're going to have about these less than positive results. They're going to ask you why, how. What I've found is there's kind of two ways that you approach kind of minimizing your anxiety. One is preparation. Okay. Preparation is very important. So if you care about the outcome of a scenario, you need to make sure that you do as much preparation for that event, for that moment as you can in the upfront. A lot of times that feeling of anxiety in pre the event will stop us from doing or I guess approaching it with enough intensity and ferocity to cover all bases. So I would have it where, and again, it might be different for you. Maybe it'd be the same, but I would have it where, because I know this situation is coming up, I would put it on the back burner. I was very much a back burner person before, so you're pushing it further and further back. Okay, I'll do it tomorrow. Okay, I'll look at it later this evening. Okay, no, tomorrow morning. Okay, actually, no, we'll do it in the afternoon. And that is a very common thing. I think most people, I had it from early. I think it probably started when I was doing my GCSEs. You need to study. You need to kind of SWOT. You need to kind of prepare as best you can for this situation because, as I said, you care about the outcome. But because you feel that anxiety whenever you approach the topic, you're more inclined to just step back from it, to push away from it, and to try and avoid having to look at it in the face. When in reality, excuse me, in reality, the best way that you can minimize your anxiety is by running through all possible eventualities that this scenario can kind of throw at you. So I realized that, okay, if I know that report inside out and I understand, even if I don't have a great explanation for why the report isn't where it should be or why the KPIs weren't met, if I at least approach all the potential variables or things that someone can throw at me in said meeting, then I'm not going to be caught off guard by anything. And when that moment arises and you've prepared for it, it's a very positive feeling of preparedness and readiness, which again it will reduce your kind of, especially the physical feeling of anxiety. It minimizes that. You're still going to be thinking about what's going to happen, but a lot of the physiological afflictions of anxiety will be minimized because your body, you're in your mind, at least there's nothing that's going to happen which you haven't already at least thought about in a lot of detail and with a lot of care and intent. So again, that's one way that we can start to minimize the gripping feeling of anxiety, that physical sensation as I describe it. The mental is always going to be there because we care. Our ego cares. We want things to go a certain way, and we're never going to be able to just say, well, we can. We're going to get into that in a second, but the second part of I guess how you beat it, how you beat it is to stop caring. And it sounds, I guess, a bit counterproductive, but the stopping caring comes after the preparation. So once you've done everything you need to do for this important moment, whether it's a business, as I said, I don't want to keep going over the different types of anxiety. You know what causes your anxiety, and or maybe you don't, but I'm hoping or I'm thinking that you do know that this applies to your scenario, whatever your scenario is that induces anxiety for you. This is the reason why you feel that way in that moment. So once you've done all your preparation, you've prepared in full, you've approached it directly, you've given it ample time to kind of sit with you, you thought about it, and you've even uncovered things that you didn't think were present there before. So you've been able to unpack things that probably aren't going to happen, eventualities that aren't really going to arise. But even if they do arise, you're still going to be very much prepared for them um in the moment if that does happen. So once you've done that, the important thing to do is on your way to the date, on your way to the meeting, on your way to the family thing you've got to do, the social thing you've got to do, the interview that you've got coming, you have to stop caring. You have to let go of the outcome of this scenario. And it's almost more important than the preparation, to be honest, because this is the mental aspect of the anxiety. The preparation will reduce your physical anxiety. The lack of care, or it's not lack of care because you still care, right? But it's just not allowing the outcome to own you. It's saying to yourself, I won't be less than if this doesn't go how I want it to go. And understanding that also you have no actual control over how someone perceives you anyway, or how someone responds to you anyway. So all you're doing by caring is making the situation harder for you to perform at your best. So the physical aspect is preparation. The mental aspect is how much you allow the care for this scenario or your desire for a certain outcome to control your mind, mostly on your way to or in the lead up to this moment, which is obviously of importance to you. So you're gonna have to, sorry, almost trick yourself into letting go of the situation, which again is very difficult to do. It feels impossible um in certain ways, but I think as you go through preparedness, it helps you to, I guess, at least minimize that care, because the equation for me is, well, I've prepared as much as I can. I've done all I can do to make sure that I get the outcome for this situation that I want. And if I don't get it, then it's not the end of the world. Essentially, something else will come along. I'll have another moment. I'll have another chance. I'll have another time to be the person that I want to be in that moment and to get the outcome that I want to get. It's not the end of the world if this one thing doesn't happen. Let's say. Um, so we go into acceptance, okay, which is, I guess, again another very important aspect of the equation of controlling or managing your anxiety. um, so the acceptance, which goes into the aspect of not caring, is that you have to accept that you can only control yourself. And in certain scenarios, dependent on your relationship with people, how people feel about you, you could let's say that you have that thing that you need to do and you've prepared. And you've prepared well, and you still don't get the outcome that you want or the desired response that you want from said person. Or and I'll use the date scenario again for this one. So you meet the girl, you spend the next few days talking to her, you're finding out what she likes, what she's into, what her interests are, what she's about, what her ambitions are, what her aspirations are, what she hopes for the future, her family, all these things that kind of build the picture of who she is. And then you don't pretend to be, the thing that you think she's looking for, but you at least align on certain points, and then maybe you create a date or a day out for you both, which is centered around a lot of the things that you've been paying attention. You've picked up on these things, and you're going to create an evening or a day for her, which is very much connected to things that she's very interested in. You might find that through the process, and again, if you've done that work, you're a good individual because you care about delivering a certain standard, not only for yourself, but for someone else, which has an element of empathy to it. I think is a good baseline for being a good person, essentially. So you never have to worry if you're that type of person anyway. So let's just say that to begin with. So let's say you've done all that and it doesn't go to plan. Maybe the date's good, you have fun. And the next day she says, "Look, I had fun, but I just don't think this is gonna work out. I think we're too different, or it's this, or it's that." Maybe she doesn't even tell you the truth. Maybe she doesn't say anything. Maybe you just don't hear from her again. That isn't a reflection of who you are. There is probably something about your personality, your vernacular, your behavior. Sometimes with women or the opposite sex or the same sex, sometimes it's just something as small as your walk or how you speak or your voice or something that they didn't see in the first moment of meeting you that they're now seeing more clearly that you're spending time together, that they think, that's just not quite for me. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to accept that you only have control over yourself, which is why, again, preparedness and putting your best foot forward is the main thing that you can do to eliminate the anxiety. Because again, if you've done all that for this person, which shows that you care, you can live with the outcome. You can always live with the outcome, and you should never have to feel like I did too much at all, because ultimately in a date relationship scenario, you're going to meet someone who is deserving of all those things and also appreciates the fact that you went through all that trouble for them. And that will maybe trump any other feeling she has, or maybe she just likes you anyway. But again, that type of approach to any setting, but particularly a date scenario or a relationship scenario, it's putting you in good stead. Again, if you were putting that much effort into your life, your existence, your everyday deeds and doings, you never have to worry about the opinions or thoughts or feelings of someone else. And you can accept that you can only control what you do. And as long as you do your best, there's really nothing else to worry about. There really isn't anything else to worry about. I promise you that. I promise you that. There's nothing else that you have to be concerned with, have care for. At that point, you have to let go. You have to be able to let go, because if you don't, you're going to step over your hard work by, again, not being in the moment, which is important when you're delivering it on any of these types of scenarios. Something I probably should have mentioned earlier, but that once you get to that moment of deliverance for, like I said, the different scenarios we've discussed, you have to be in the moment to execute it at the level that you want to execute at. Because if you're still caught in anxiety, you're going to be thinking about real-time responses to what you're doing, which again is only going to stop your flow and stop you from being present and giving your best self to the people who are in the room with you, who are trying to receive what you're giving to them, essentially. So a combination of preparation and indifference to the results can fortify us. Those are the two things which will help best when you're trying to achieve a certain outcome and your ego wants that control over how that person perceives you, or how people perceive you, how your boss perceives you, how your mum perceives you, whoever that person is who's of some importance to you, because it always is related to someone who is of value to you, or you feel there's a value to this person or persons that create that anxiety for you. And being honest, and I'm going to get into, again, a more personal aspect of this, I found that the combination of preparation and indifference and those feelings and how they can fortify you is most keenly implemented where faith in a higher power is present. So when you have to accept and stop caring and live with the results, it's going to be easier if you're connected to the higher power. So if you know you're not in control from a baseline standpoint, then letting go of the situation is going to be easier, because you know you're not in control anyway. You know that you're just a cell in a cell that is the nucleus of the universe. I don't know. My science isn't great. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think you get what I'm getting at. You're just one cell in the construct, the structure of everything, right? So if you have that faith in that higher power and you know how small you are in the expanse of space, why put too much emphasis on individual moments? Why put too much emphasis on stuff which will be forgotten tomorrow, or in a year from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 20, 100, whatever? You know what I'm getting at, essentially, is that these are just moments. And whilst they are of great significance because this is our conscious lived experience, we have to also acknowledge that, again, there's a higher power that put us here, and having faith in that higher power is going to make it easier for you to relinquish the control, which is going to allow you to reduce your anxiety significantly. Not having the faith in the higher power, it's still going to be, you're still going to be able to, again, reduce your anxiety through preparation and indifference to results, because you already care about, attaining a certain outcome. So you need to let go, right? But it's easier to let go when you know that you are not the ultimate, you are not the highest, you are not the one at the top of the food chain. There is something else greater than you, which is steering things. And if you were connected to that thing, then they're going to steer them in your favor, especially if you're willing it through the vision of the higher power, which is, again, a separate topic that we'll definitely get into further down the line. But the reality is, through these elements and understandings, if you can get around all of them as I described, and as I said, I'm a living testament to this, that anxiety rarely grazes me because it doesn't matter who I meet, they're not in control. And their opinion, whilst sometimes it might be of importance to me, I know that it doesn't make a difference to who I am, essentially. And again, I only have that through preparation and a lack of care. And it's not the lack of care which means that I don't do my best. It's the lack of care which means that I do my absolute best and let go. I let go of what will I let go of what is and accept what will be. And then I'm able to just step back from it. And ultimately that allows me to be present in the situation and deliver at the highest level that I can achieve. And once you're delivering at the highest level you can achieve, you can be damn sure that you're going to get the results that you want because, you have your talents, you have your abilities, you have your skills. And again, those are given to you by the higher power. So if you're using those to the best of your abilities, again, you don't really have to worry about what happens after that. So again, you have that presence, you have that preparation, you have that indifference, that lack of care for the results because you did the work. You have that faith in the higher power that tells you, I'm not the be all and end all, so I need to accept the results and accept that the higher power is really in control. And once you accept that you're prepared as best you can, whatever happens next was always going to happen. Okay. You were you. The result that was going to follow that moment was always going to be that way. And the reality is, once you get to that level of acceptance, it's really easy to just kind of flow through life and to have great moments with people, with strangers, with people you know well. You allow people to see a side of you which isn't always present because sometimes we get caught in our brain, we overthink things, and that thinking freezes us. And sometimes it freezes us in some of the best moments, and we miss things, and we don't know that we're missing things. But the reality is, when you have that sense of presence, and you're always available to people who are around you, you really get to live with an element of freedom which is unparalleled. I won't go too much into that because again, there's a lot of things I have to say for future videos. So that I can speak about them in a lot more detail. I don't want to glaze over them, but that having that freedom and that lack of anxiety has allowed me to connect with people on a much higher plane and to help people with much greater force and strength than I ever could before. And I think really that's as much as I want to share on this topic. I hope that um my angle on this has been of value to anyone who's going to watch this video. Again, like, comment, share, and subscribe are not things of great importance to me. I just hope that if you know someone who suffers from anxiety in a crippling manner, a very strong form of anxiety, that you would share this with them, and I would hope that it can be of value to them and they can start doing the work for themselves to get to that place, because it's not going to be overnight for sure. It took me a long time to be able to minimize anxiety's control over certain aspects of my life, but in doing so I've gained a new freedom which has brought me to this place where I'm now speaking to you. So great value in doing so. We have to kind of find a way to minimize that anxiety and in turn gain freedom. And I will close with this, as again I did with the last episode. I'm going to share, I guess, some thoughts relating to anxiety. Um, and what I have here, there are, I guess, four fears I've outlined, and these fears, I think, are some of the main causes of anxiety. They induce huge anxiety in us. And if you can remove these fears from your life, if you are not afraid of these things, if these things don't scare you and they don't play on your brain, and you can accept them as part of life and you can move through them, again, you're going to have the presence that's going to allow you to thrive, sorry, and be freer than you ever thought you could be. So, fear number one is rejection. If you have a fear of rejection, that's a huge cause for anxiety. Sorry, I just shouted into the mic a little bit there. But that's a huge cause for anxiety, right? You're worried about approaching the girl at the coffee shop who looks cute because she might just say no. So what? Who cares? As long as you approach with your best self, use your charm, use your wit, walk with confidence. You know, you might not get that one, but it might be the next one or the one after that. Or however, it doesn't really matter. You cannot have a fear of rejection. That's going to cripple you immediately. It removes access to certain things just right off the bat. Okay, you can't do certain things if you have a fear of rejection. Have to get that out of there. Similar to that is failure, but slightly different. So when you go for the job interview and you're worried about whether the interviewer is gonna like you and whether they're gonna invite you back for the second interview or whether they're gonna give you the job, that is gonna stop you. You're gonna start overthinking about what you're doing instead of being present and delivering your best self, your clearest self with the most clarity, the most energy, the most vibrancy that you can, which are all the things that are actually gonna get you the job, right? So failure, we cannot fear failure. We have to accept failure as a byproduct of doing the things that we want to do in life, right? Fear number 3 that we have to move, which is anxiety inducing, is conflict. So whenever we feel ourselves being trodden on, being minimized, being marginalized, and we want to kind of deal with it head on, or we feel like we want to deal with it head on, and there's a desire there, but then also we have that fear like, oh, I don't want to get into an argument, I don't want to get into a fight, I don't want to go to war for this thing. That has to be minimized, right? Because your feelings are valid, your opinion is valid, and no one should be able to minimize you to the point where you feel less than them, essentially, right? So sometimes conflict is very necessary. You should never look to hurt anyone or diminish anyone, but if someone diminishes you, conflict is something that you're going to have to approach head on with directness. And this is one that I've suffered from greatly in my own life. So I know that this is true, because if you could, I can't show you the person, but if you could see who I was a short time ago, especially as far as conflict goes, you'd look at me very differently, right? But getting over my fear of conflict has given me great strength to the point where I don't have to, again, and it goes to, because I'm prepared for conflict, I now can walk away from conflict without going to war per se, because I understand it better. I can accept that, oh, it's just that person. If I feel there's enough to argue about or enough for us to need to discuss here, we can approach it. But if I realize they're just ignorant and they don't really get where I'm coming from, and they don't see why what they're doing is wrong, then I can just let it go. It's not the end of the world. Maybe they'll learn their lesson down the line. Maybe I am their karma. Maybe I'm not their karma. Maybe I just need to focus on what I'm doing and continue on. And I've had to do that in many different situations. And the final fear, and this goes to a lot of where I'm at currently in my own journey in kind of, gain insight, gain understanding, and get to that next level, is the fear of being alone, loneliness, not having people there with you, not being able to, when you're on your path, once you, again, like we said in the last episode about sacrifice, once you're on your purpose path, you're going to have to accept being alone is a huge part of that, because your time is going to be used differently. There's aspects to you which you aren't going to be indulging in as much, which means that you're maybe not going to see certain people, certain friends, or maybe it's a certain girlfriend or whatever, that you're not going to be interacting with the same way you used to, because you're on a new path now. So you can't fear being alone when you're on your purpose path. You have to accept that that's a huge part of getting to that next stage. And once you accept, I don't want to say loneliness, it's just being alone, because, you don't have to be lonely. You can always go and make friends. And most of us have families, right? So it's just the need to be alone to get to your next stage, really, that I'm talking about here. If you fear that you're going to miss out on something, or you're not going to have that connection with another human being that you want, because you're busy chasing down this thing that you want, and that stops you from staying focused on what you want long term, again, this is goes back to sacrifice, then you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle. And then later down the line, you're going to live with the regret that you weren't able to achieve that thing, because you weren't ready to accept being alone while you focus on that thing that you're trying to do. So these are just a few aspects of anxiety that are related to some of our fears that I think they're important to get a handle on and gain control of. And it will help you, I think, in terms of, like I said, work situations, family situations, relationship situations. Managing these anxiety inducing scenarios is all to do with our preparation and our acceptance and lack of care, and it goes towards us achieving and attaining what we want to achieve. I'm gonna leave it there. Like I said, you don't have to like, comment, share, or subscribe, but please, if you think there's anyone that could benefit from some of the things I've said today, I'd love it if you could share it with them. I'll catch you in episode 4. Peace.